Merry Christmas. Isn't it good to be here? Christmas time. It's not snow, but can we just pretend this is snow? Guys, it's snowing. Does anyone else like to decorate your house for Christmas? Oh, 6 people. Cool. At our house, we love to decorate. And I remember before we had kids, we had all white lights. We put white lights on the bushes and on the house, and it was very classy. And then we had 4 kids. And I would like to show you a picture of what my house looks like right now. Yes, that is historically accurate, a picture of Santa riding on a T-Rex, I think. The lights are mismatched. Oh, man. We've come a long way, baby. I like it better this way anyways. It's more us. We're just kind of putting it out there. I really enjoy looking at Christmas lights, and so I found a few pictures for us to just enjoy together. I really like this one. It's got a huge leg lamp, if you've seen the Christmas Story. That one's great, like if you know about Christmas Vacation. That's a good one. I don't think that's what she meant, right? And then I really like that one too. It's great. Oh, man. Is this what Christmas is really about? Like, I forgot some of these. Awesome. Well, no, this is not what Christmas is really about, but it sure brings joy, right? And that is really a fun thing to do. And so you'll never hear me guilt you for not having a nativity in your front yard. I think we should have fun with our Christmas decorations. If that for you that's a nativity, that's awesome. But I actually don't have a nativity. I have Santa riding a T-Rex. And so if you're one of those people that really wants it to not be like the fun side, maybe you should find another church because we just have fun here. Christmas is fun. But we're busy, right? We're so busy. Is anybody going to a Christmas party this year? I mean, you're coming to church? Even when it's raining, that's pretty impressive that you're in church. We have Christmas parties. Somehow, school slows down, but we get more busy. And I want to ask you a question. If we're moving so fast through this holiday, could you be missing something? You're moving so fast. Could you be missing something? Maybe like a little version of Christmas FOMO. If you guys ever heard this acronym, fear of missing out, FOMO. Missing out has more to do, FOMO has more to do with an activity. And I don't think I'm actually talking about an activity as the thing that you might be missing out on. In fact, it may be more like the opposite. But maybe there's something deeper that you're missing out. The first Christmas, they were busy too, just like we're busy. And they weren't putting up trees. There was no Christmas trees I don't think, in the first century. They weren't shopping for gifts, although there were these 3 guys that brought gifts. We don't talk about that in this version of the story, though. There's no Home Alone. They don't decorate. Jesus didn't decorate for Christmas, by the way. So if you don't like to decorate for Christmas, you could tell your neighbor, Jesus didn't decorate for Christmas. It's kind of weird, right? But even though they were not figuring out how to position the elf on the shelf or whatever holiday tradition has got you staying busy, people were still busy, and they were busy because you read it in the story where the cute little kids, one of mine was one of the ones that said it, but these cute little kids were saying they were on their way to a census. And a census, so the census really was so that God would fulfill a prophecy, because back in Micah 5:2, it says this, "But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come one who will be a ruler over all Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times." So God orchestrated this thing where a bunch of regular people had to go and do this census, all to fulfill God's prophecy that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. So let's read how the prophecy comes true. So Luke 2, verses 1 through 7, we're going to read this. It'll be on the screen if it's too dark for you to read. But it says this, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. So in Luke, this is the first we read of Joseph. Matthew kind of gives us more details about Joseph. You go there, there's different accounts of Jesus' life. We're reading the one in Luke today. But in Matthew, you read about how Joseph, when he found out Mary was pregnant, he wanted to divorce her quietly. But then he hears from God in a dream. So, if your parents have marital problems, so did Jesus's before he was even born. And then Joseph hears from God in a dream, and the angel says to him, "Don't divorce Mary." And the Holy Spirit tells him to name him Jesus, for he will save their people from their sins. Now, the angel didn't say Jesus. Most likely, the name that they said was Yeshua. And Yeshua means Yahweh saves. Yahweh is the name that God gave himself when he spoke to Moses in the burning bush. He said, "I am that I am." And in Hebrew, that's just Yahweh, Yahweh. And so this is Yeshua, God's salvation. And so Joseph does this humble thing, and I think he deserves a shout out because he lived a life of a stepdad. And so if you come from a blended family, so did Jesus. It's kind of cool, right? He had half brothers. People probably looked down on his mom for getting pregnant when she wasn't married. So if you've experienced that, Jesus has experienced that. There could have been tension, I think, between Joseph and Jesus because it wasn't Joseph's baby. But Joseph chose to trust God and to lay that down and do the humble thing. And so Mary and Joseph go 80 miles. Now, I don't know if you've ever driven 80 miles. Well, you can get to Mexico in 80 miles. But what if you didn't have a car? Would that be hard? Some historians think that Mary rode on a donkey, which that doesn't sound very nice in the third trimester either, right? Or I guess it would be the fourth trimester, right? Because she's about to have her baby. No, 3. There's only 3 trimesters. I'm looking over at Jillian. You're like a nurse that delivers babies. So the third trimester, I'm really smart. But it would have been uncomfortable, I think, even on a donkey. And so I think Joseph probably in his head was thinking, I'm going to bring Mary with me just in case. We're going to go get this census taken care of, and then we're heading back home so we can have family around us. We can have this baby in our own house because, they had babies in their houses back then. So when they got there, what happened? Verse 6. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Now, anyone in here who's been around a baby being born, you know this. Somehow it never comes at the most convenient time, does it? You make your plans, but you can't plan around a baby. I mean, even if you don't have to be in a stable to have your baby, if you've had a kid, it doesn't always go according to your plan, right? You don't know when it's going to come. You don't know how long it's going to take. This was not the birth plan that Mary was hoping for, right? I don't know if they wrote down birth plans. Probably just have a baby was her birth plan. But here we are. She has not just a baby, the Messiah, the Christ, God's Son, Yeshua, God's salvation. And he comes as a little baby, born in the stable because there was no room in the inn. And maybe you've asked yourself this before, but why did Jesus come as a baby? This is a great, I think, question. And I actually really like this question because I think I maybe know why. Jesus could have come as a man. He could have come as a king to rule. When God created Adam, it says he made him a man. And so it's not that God couldn't make Jesus a man. He could make him a man. But Jesus came as a baby, and he lived a life of utter dependence. And he had to rely on his parents for everything. And then he became a child, and he had to learn everything. And even though he was the Son of God, Jesus was a teenager. He probably had BO. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, I think he did. I think he did. So the reason that Jesus came as a baby was because he wanted to be one of us. He wanted to experience everything that you and I experience. We call that the incarnation. In fact, this is not the first big word. I'm going to use several big words today. And if you don't know what they mean, I'm going to tell you what they mean. So you don't have to worry. Don't let your eyes glaze over if you hear a big word, because I'm going to explain all of them to you. You're going to leave smarter. You're going to go home and be like, hey, you know what it's called when Jesus came down to be one of us? The incarnation. You're going to be so smart. And that's not the last big word you're going to learn today. The reason that it's so cool is because Jesus came down to be one of us. This is what separates Christianity from every world religion. Because every world religion says, I'm down here, and whatever deity is up here, and somehow I got to climb this ladder, and I have to ascend morally and be perfect and achieve something from God. But it's impossible. We are separated from God. But Jesus didn't expect us to come up. The incarnation says, no, Jesus came down. He came to us. He came to be one of us. He experienced life in every single stage, and it was beautiful. He experienced every moment of life, just like you do. Even though he was God, he lived as a man, and what he lived out was the greatest rescue mission in history. That's why he came. He dealt with everything that you and I deal with: pain, joy, heartache, triumph, tragedy, all of it. He was misunderstood. And it all started right here in a stable, in a manger. Emmanuel, right? It's one of the names we call Jesus. Emmanuel just means God with us as a tiny baby. And this holy moment that he experienced and that we're thinking about right now was the moment where Jesus came to bring life to us. And it's something that we desperately need, life. Not just breath in our lungs. We already have that, right? But I'm talking about true spiritual life. God gave you life physically. Your heart is beating. Breath is in your lungs. There's nothing you can do to make someone that's not alive become alive. Only God can give life. And it all started with Adam and Eve in the garden. And Adam and Eve had a relationship with God. They had spiritual life and physical life. They walked with God in the garden. And remember, God gave him one job. And he said, don't eat that fruit. And what did they do? You had one job, man, Adam and Eve. I don't blame them, though, because I know myself. And I hate to say this, I would have eaten the fruit. And I think you would have, too, because he gives us the same choice. Will you follow God's design for life, or will you, depart from that? Does anyone else call your kid, good? I find myself saying this to my kids sometimes. My son will, do his buckle in the car, and I'll say, good boy. And I remember wanting that from my parents. My dad would say to me, you're a good boy. And it's a lie. That's kind of weird, right? It's weird to say. Your kids, my kids, you and me, we're actually not good. We ate the apple just like Adam and Eve, every single one of us. And when we do, it kills something in us spiritually. And we're separated from God. And there's this spiritual death that exists. And when Jesus came, the incarnation, Jesus came to be one of us. He lived a perfect life. He was a good boy. The only one in history, Jesus. And when we lack that good that Jesus has, it leads to pain and suffering in the world. This does not feel like a very Christmassy message, but we hurt each other, don't we? In fact, we even hurt ourselves. We kind of have this self-destructive thing going on, don't we? We are destroying the earth. That's part of it. Merry Christmas. But this is why Jesus came. Everything in the world has been more and more broken every generation. And it's the same brokenness inside of us. It's just compounding with more people, right? And into this broken world came Jesus, Yeshua, Yahweh saves, God's salvation. That's why he came. You know, he didn't have to come. Jesus could have stayed in paradise in heaven. He didn't need us. But let me ask you this. Have you ever thought about this? Jesus came. What was the reason? What was the reason Jesus came? Could this be what you're missing? What's the reason Jesus came to earth? You might say it's for God's glory. Yeah, I'd say it's for God's glory. But there's something that he did, something that he wanted. The reason Jesus came was for you. Jesus came for you. I think maybe this is what we're missing. You are what he wants. He didn't have to come. He didn't have to endure everything he endured, but he chose to for you. Salvation implies that you and I need to be saved. It's kind of a vulnerable thing to say, I'm broken and I need a Savior. And that's why Christmas is not for people who think that they're good. If you believe the lie that I kind of believed as a kid when my dad told me you're a good boy, maybe Christmas isn't for you. Christmas is only for people who know they need a Savior, because Jesus, Yeshua, God's salvation, Yahweh saves. That's what Christmas is all about. And salvation, this word, we're going to get into it for a minute. I want to teach you about the 3 tenses of salvation. And this is the reason that Christmas is so great. The reason Christmas is so amazing is because salvation came through Jesus. And he came for you and for me. And so I want us to pause. I think maybe this is the thing you're missing. And when I say salvation, some of us think different things. Some of us hope, like maybe I'll be saved one day, right? Or maybe you think about salvation like, you know what, I got saved, and now I'm good. But I believe that Scripture teaches it's not either one of those on its own. It's not that hopefully someday I'll be saved, or that I'm already saved so I'm good. But that there's 3 tenses of salvation. If you're taking notes, it's kind of dark. Maybe you could take notes on your phone. But there's 3 tenses of salvation. There's past, there's present, and there's future. And I want to talk through each one of them. Because salvation is called a helmet by the Apostle Paul. He's talking about all the armor of God. And he says, put on the helmet of salvation. And so salvation is a helmet, but it doesn't work unless you put it on. So there has to be a point when you receive salvation. So when you hear someone say, I got saved, they can be secure in that, because it's like I put on that helmet. And it's not anything you do. Ephesians 2:8-9 says this, for it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. Faith is just believing that Jesus can do it. Believing in what he's done for you. This is not from yourselves. You can't do it. This is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. So if you hear someone walking around being like, I got saved, they're not boasting in themselves. They're saying, I got saved because Jesus saved me. God's salvation, Yeshua, Yahweh saves. You have been saved. And maybe you haven't been saved. All you have to do. You know the only thing that's required for salvation is faith. If you choose to believe it, not just believe it in your head, but believe it so much that you basically you hand your life over to God and say, all right, this is your life, I believe. And that belief changes everything. And it sets you on a trajectory. And it's confusing a little bit, because even though you are saved from the consequences of sin, the consequences of sin is death. And when you believe that Jesus died for you, that he rose again, and you choose to really believe that with everything you are, he gives you spiritual life, and you're walking in life. So the first word that I want you to learn is Um, justification. Justification is putting the helmet on. A good way to remember justification is just as if I'd never sinned. And so justification is salvation from the consequences of sin. So actually, we believe every one of us starts out spiritually dead. And we are separated from God. And there's actually a place, there's a real place. I believe there's a real place called hell. And hell, Gehenna, as Jesus said it, it just meant outside of the city. Because hell is just absence from the presence of God. Every good thing about this world is because of God's presence here. And so to be separated from the presence of God is what we believe hell is. And so justification says, it is the righteousness of Jesus that saves me. And when God looks at me, I've got my helmet of salvation on, and all he sees is his pure, righteous Son. So you are made righteous by Jesus and his perfect life and his sacrifice on the cross. That's justification, all right? You ready for another big word? Sanctification is the next word. Sanctification is salvation from the power of sin. So if justification is I have been saved, sanctification is I am being saved. Your salvation is not only in the past. You can be saved every single day, not just from the consequences of sin, but from the power of sin and the grip of sin in your life. I want you to think about, if you are someone who feels like, man, I know I'm saved, but it still feels like sin has power over me. That is because you are not walking in the salvation that God has for you. And it's not that there's a threat to your salvation. It's that he wants you to experience it more and more every day. Freedom, healing. Come on, don't we want that? Freedom and healing from the power and the grip of sin. This is what I want for us as a people. This is what sanctification is. So I have been saved. I am being saved. And in Philippians 2:12 and 13, it says this. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And as soon as you start to think that it's about you, listen to verse 13. For it is God who works in you to will and to act and to fulfill his good purpose. So God's desire is not just to save you from the consequences of your sin, but to save you from the power of sin that it has in your life. That is sanctification. See, you're learning some big words. Everybody say sanctification. Everybody say justification. Justification is just as if I never sinned. Sanctification means every day that I walk following Jesus, I am being saved. I am walking in more freedom and healing. And it might feel like you take a step back sometimes, but you can always keep walking towards that. And then, you know, even though you're walking in justification and you're finding freedom from the grip of sin, can I tell you, this is still a hard world to live in, right? There's sin all around us. There's brokenness all around us. Our own decisions hurt us. We hurt each other. There's sickness, there's death. The world sometimes just feels like it's sick, right? This world is not where we were meant to be. And one day, not only I have been saved, I am being saved, but one day I will be saved. And that future salvation, it's not that you're not saved yet. That's not what it means. It means all three. I have been saved. I am saved. And I will be saved. That will be saved is called glorification. Everybody say glorification. Glorification is salvation. One day we will experience salvation from the presence of sin. There will be no weeping. There will be no death. There will be no more sorrow. We'll be with Jesus. He's going to take us home. And it's weird to even think about heaven during Christmas, but really, heaven is what Christmas is all about, because the hope of heaven came to us through Yeshua. Yahweh saves. And we have been saved. And we are being saved. And ultimately, we will be saved. And I believe this is what we have been missing out on. Because salvation is not just a check the box thing, right? Sometimes we accidentally do that, like, hey, have you been saved? No. Yeah, you have to put the helmet on. You have to make the decision to believe and start following Jesus. Because if you don't do that, you never will be saved. But there is a hope for salvation that comes in Jesus. And you don't have to wonder. I want to read Romans 8:16 through 18, where it talks about how this future glorification will happen. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. There is a time and a place where you and I will experience the glory of God along with Jesus. And it's amazing. And it almost feels weird to say we will experience his glory, but really it even says, how does it say it again? Yeah, it says we may also share in his glory. So it's I have been saved. I am being saved, and I will be saved. This is the joy of Christmas. So if you're wondering, am I missing something at Christmas? This is it. This is what I think maybe we're missing out on. And it's not because, it's not just because we're busy. You could stop, right? Jesus, when he came, he kind of disrupted the world, didn't he? He disrupted Mary and Joseph's plans. They wanted to go back home, but he said, no, I'm coming right now. And so I want to say, maybe for you, what you need is to let Jesus disrupt your world. And it will be inconvenient. And it won't be easy letting Jesus disrupt your world. But this is what salvation is all about. Because you know what? Salvation isn't just for you and me. It's for the whole world. Jesus is not just the hope of a few of us. Jesus is the hope of the world. And so practically, you may think, okay, you're just trying to cancel Santa, Brian. No, I'm not trying. Santa's coming next week. He's going to be here outside. We're going to have Santa. But we're going to say, no, Santa is part of the after party. Santa's not part of our worship service. Let's just make Jesus more important than Santa. It's like a really practical way my wife's family does this is they do tons of presents under the Christmas tree, but Christmas morning, before they open a single present, my father-in-law will open up that passage, and he'll read Luke 2, and we'll just sit there, and we'll listen to how Jesus came. And it's simple, but it's really profound. Every year, my kids are going to grow up knowing, you know what? We prioritize Jesus over the presents. Hopefully they won't be thinking, oh, yeah, I want to hear the Jesus story so we can get presents. I don't know. But prioritize Jesus over Santa. That's really practical. Let him disrupt your world. And then ultimately, here's what we want to be. I think I have a picture of my 5-year-old Luke. Amy told, actually, you told Holly, and then Holly told me. Happy birthday, Holly, by the way. Yeah. Woo! There are cupcakes, I think. She came down one morning, and my 5-year-old Luke, you can show that picture. He was just sitting there, staring at the tree. He's never still. But that one morning, she went down, and he was just sitting there, taking it in. He was mesmerized. And honestly, we kind of do it too. At the end of the day, we turn every light off except the tree. Does anybody else do this? Just kind of look at the tree for a minute like, wow, it's beautiful. This is the image that I want us to have. Stop and stare. And just take it in. Take in Yeshua, Jesus, God's salvation, the hope of heaven come down for us. And through him I have been saved, and I am being saved, and I will be saved. Because this is who Jesus is, and this is what Jesus does. And so I want to just invite you this Christmas, find a time to stop and stare. I don't know what you need to eliminate from your schedule, but I'm sure there's something, and it'll be worth it. And so we're going to continue through this morning, I'm going to ask the team to come up right now. I want us to sing a song about heaven right now. Because Jesus is the hope of heaven, and even though it feels like Christmas is about Jesus coming from heaven, I want us to think about heaven, because really, that's our ultimate place that he's taking us to. And then in a minute, I also want us to think about what Jesus has done for us, because the thing Jesus did to accomplish salvation was from the manger all the way up to the cross where he died for us. And so I want us to sing this song. It's called Hymn of Heaven. I love it. I want to ask, why don't you go ahead and stand up. Let's sing this together, and then we'll take communion, and we'll be done this morning. Thanks.